Jewel and Ben Warris were British comedians who used a deep connection and perfect timing to become stars with top billing. The success could only last so long, and they eventually stopped working together. Fans wondered what happened. Keep watching to learn the real reason Jewel and Ben Warris split up for good. Jewel. James Arthur Thomas Jewel Marsh was born December 4, 1909. His father was a comedian and actor, and he made his stage debut at age 4 in Robinson Crusoe. He kept working with his father until he was 10 and eventually became the stage manager for the family show. His father already had claims to the stage name Jimmy Jewel, so when he went to start his own act, he performed as Maurice Marsh. This chosen name was inspired by his talent for impressions of French entertainer Maurice Chevalier. His first official London stage appearance was at the Bedford Music Hall in Camden Town, England in 1925. He continued performing alone until 1934. Ben Holder Driver Warriss was born May 29, 1909. His father was an insurance salesman, but his mother was Jimmy's mother's sister. Ben was 10 years old when he made his professional debut in October of 1919. He appeared at the Hippodrome in Stockport and then appeared in London at the Bedford Theatre in Camden Town. He was a regular in the Alexander and Moe's minstrel show and then began to dream of going solo. Jewel and Warriss. Jimmy and Ben were first cousins. They were allegedly born in the same bed a few months apart and then raised in the same home at 52 Andover Street in Sheffield. They began working together on May 21, 1934 at the Palace Theatre. They were booked separately, but the double act they were meant to work with never showed up. A bit of extra money convinced them to improvise a routine together. It went so well, they decided to stay together. They started touring around the world, visiting Australia and America. Returning to their home country, they began work on the Moss Empire circuit. It was modeled after American vaudeville, with a blend of physical comedy and dialogue hoax in their sketches. Jimmy was the fool in ridiculous clothes, and Ben was the sharply dressed wise guy. Unlike Flanagan and Allen, one of the most popular comedy acts of the day, they wouldn't take turns setting up and delivering their gags. You could often see them swap lines, shape up a scenario, and go right into a sketch. Critics loved them, calling them unique and an entirely new type of comedy act. They were known as the Gems of Comedy and topped the bill at the London Palladium with their pantomimes over and over again. The duo appeared in 6 Royal Variety performances from 1942 to 48. They had films such as Rhythm Serenade in 1943, What a Carry-On in 1949, and Let's Have a Murder in 1950. They were also fixtures on radio series like Navy Mixture from 1946 to 47, and even got their own cartoon strip in the children's comic Radio Fun. When their popularity began to increase, so did their paychecks. Their management didn't want to give them a raise, but they went on their own and were hired back at £100 a week. One of their most successful but difficult to find projects was the BBC radio series Up the Pole. It began in October 1947 and featured the duo as owners of an Arctic trading post. The show gave them national exposure. They no longer had the physical comedy of their act and simplified their personalities, making Jimmy's character more foolish and Ben's more cold and calculating. The revisions made it popular enough to run for 4 series over 5 years and repeat at least 3 times a week. Scriptwriters, led by Ronnie Hanbury, made the plots even better. Each episode featured a musical number, and one even had Julie Andrews singing before she was an adult. The unfortunate part is that Up the Pole is now lost to media, with only 1 episode surviving. They continued to succeed after that, earning top billing in 2 West End shows, the 1942 production of Gangway and the 46 production of High Time. They also began appearing on television in the short-lived series It's a Living in 1962. A Rollercoaster Ending. Jimmy and Ben then had a series of highs and lows. It started with the BBC TV series Turn It Up in 1951. It was a series of 1-hour shows full of variety acts and their own sketches and musical routines. It attained what was believed to be the highest ratings of any light entertainment show of the time. The show returned as Turn It Up in 1953. The show was equally successful, but critics felt the quality of the scripts had begun to dip. Jimmy and Ben responded by changing the writers. Dick Hills and Sid Green gave it a fresh identity. They also created new shows for the duo. These included the spy spoof Double Cross in 1956. It was Jimmy and Ben's first attempt to carry a show as actors and one of the BBC's most ambitious and expensive programs. The studio head, Ronnie Waldman, wouldn't accept Jimmy's idea to pre-record and edit it like a film. He insisted on having it in front of a live audience, except for a few sequences. Jimmy and Ben were seen as pioneers again, even though certain reviewers found the plots confusing and the blend of comedy and drama jarring. The cracks didn't begin to show until the BBC started pushing them back towards commercial TV. 1958's The Jewel and Warris scrapbook was a disappointing sketch show. ITV stepped in with a hefty paycheck to keep the stars, but was also strict about what they could do. They ended up in further disappointing projects such as For Love or Money in 1959, The Jewel and Warris Show from 58 to 62, and At Home with Jimmy and Ben in 1962. The sitcom It's a Living was a massive flop with fans and critics that only lasted for 4 of its 13 episodes. It never recovered, and neither did Jimmy and Ben. They were not only coming off a string of lackluster projects, but were being overshadowed by other hit comedy duos. Morecambe and Wise lured away their favorite writers, Mike and Bernie Winters. Their names fell so low they had to audition to entertain American troops. They sued the agents responsible for this humiliation and won in 1964. The final TV episode they had together was on March 5, 1965, on the variety show Club Night. They felt like they'd become irrelevant, but wanted to bow out gracefully. Why did they split up? Jimmy knew Ben was an anxious man who wasn't ready to let go. He couldn't address it face to face, so he wrote him a letter instead. Ben was so upset he stayed in bed for a week. They officially agreed to end their 32-year partnership in 1966. Jimmy admitted it was like losing his right arm. The tabloids had been spreading rumors for years that the two were estranged or even grew to hate each other, but that was never true. They supported each other's solo careers and remained friends despite not having much in common. They kept in touch and they met in private. They even reunited for charity from time to time, such as for the October 15, 1974 edition of Looks Familiar. They talked and sang lyrics about their time together with what seemed like genuine smiles on their faces. Jimmy Jewel died the day before he turned 86 on December 3, 1995. He was survived by his wife Belle Blewett and their son and their adopted daughter. He was cremated and interred at the Golden Green Crematorium. Ben Warriss died at age 83 on January 13, 1993. He's buried at Streatham Park Cemetery in the same section as comedian Will Hay. Jimmy gave an emotional tribute saying he was, quote, more than just a partner, he was a true friend. Now it's time to hear from you. What was your favorite memory of Jewel and Warriss? Did you know they stayed close in their later years? Let us know in the comments section below.